This janitor died and shocked the world because despite earning an average income and driving a beaten up old car, Ronald Reed was secretly worth over $8 million. Did he have a rich family? Was he an undercover boss? I had to find out, and through my research, I found that the answer is deceptively simple. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I'd invest on the average salary in New Zealand, the 4-step system to build your wealth, so that by the end, you have a plan to be like Ronald and build extraordinary wealth on an ordinary income. Now, one of the most inspiring stories I have ever heard is about a guy called Ronald Reed. Now, he grew up in a very small town in Vermont over in the States. He swept floors, he pumped petrol for a living, he drove a beat-up old car and held his coat together with a safety pin because I think some of his buttons popped off. And some of my...
Do you remind you back to the old days of your shorts?
Well, do you know, back when I was even more podgy than I am now, I was getting quite fat and my buttons started popping off my shorts. And I said to my mother, I don't know what's wrong if they shrunk in the wash. And she said, you've gotten fat. Anyway, I was having my Ronald Reed moment. But the interesting thing about Ronald Reed is nobody had a clue that when he died at age 92, this is maybe 12 years ago now in 2014, he left around $8 million US, so 12 million New Zealand, to his local library and hospital. Now, this guy never earned much money. He just bought shares in good companies. He was very, very frugal. He basically never sold any of those investments, and he ended up with all this money. Now, I don't necessarily think we should all go out and copy exactly what Ronald Reed did, be extraordinarily frugal, keeping our coats together with safety pins when the buttons come off. I think there's probably an argument for saying if you've made that amount of money, enjoy it while you have. Help
100%.
the causes that you care about, but maybe keep some for yourself. But what I think this story shows is if you are really frugal, even on the average salary, you can get ahead. Now, the trouble in New Zealand is that we're all very shy. So it's quite hard to find a Kiwi-based Ronald Reed example of somebody who's done that. But we know that when we read Mary Holmes' columns in the Herald, there are these people around New Zealand. So if we're thinking about investing on the average salary, probably a very good place to start is what does average actually look like in New Zealand?
So let's talk about the average in New Zealand. So the average Kiwi household earns about $139,000 a year. So that's roughly 2 people on the median wage of about 70 grand a year. So about 140. Now, typically 1 or 2 kids, and the average mortgage is about $400,000. It's $389,000. So let's talk about how much actually hits your account.
Because if you earn $140K a year before tax, you know that you're not getting $140K a year in your bank account.
Yeah, and often the number sounds big until you do what drops out the bottom. So let's say you're both getting that 70 grand, and then tax from that, because of course we've got this tiered tax system. It's actually relatively low. $13,000 a year comes out of each person's pay packet. Then you got another $1,200 for ACC.
People forget about ACC
It's
all
the
the time. But that's if you're earning 70 grand. I mean, what is it? I think it's about 1.7% of your income in total.
Yeah, it's actually pretty significant. And then, of course, KiwiSaver. So you're contributing to KiwiSaver. So 3.5%, that's $2.5 grand a year. So another $50 a week. Is that right? $50 a week coming out of that. And then so your take-home pay, what actually hits your account, it's about $1,000 a week each, $53,000 a year once you've got all those deductions. So you've gone from 140 to 106 in terms of what's actually hitting your account. Now, if it happens that one person's at home and the other person's working and you've still got that total gross income, before tax income, of course, you'll be taxed at a higher rate because of our tiered system, and so even less will hit your bank account. So that's something to bear in mind. So per week, in total, it's $2,000, about $1,000 a week hits your account if you're earning it, both earning 70 grand a year.
So $2,000 as a household, right, is what we're taking home.
So now that we've established what average is, if I think about the first step of this 5-step investment system, number one is to face the future and do a stock take of your money. Because let's say you haven't been that great with money in the past, and look, I've been there too, so I'm with you. And let's say you actually want to make a change, because not everybody does. I think you've got to do something that is very hard and actually face the truth. Now, I've recently had to do this with my weight. So a developer posted on Instagram talking about how I was a bit fat, chubs as it were. And so I started talking to my PT. I was like, okay, what do I need to do to change this? Because he's right? Yeah, he's right. And so what should I do? He said, well, what you've got to do is you've got to take your top off every Sunday and you've got to take a photo of yourself on the side with your gut out.
Yeah.
You need to face the facts of what is actually happening. So I did it, and I was I'm not going to put this on screen. Nobody's going to see this. I was like, oh, wow, I got some rolls, I got some rolls. So I'm like so motivated to do something about it because I could see the reality in front of me. Now, of course, if you're a little bit overweight, you generally know that you're overweight. But until you take that photo and look at it, you don't realize quite how much. And I think it's exactly the same with your money. You might know that you're not particularly good with money, but until you take that photo, that snapshot, you don't realize how bad it is. I think what you've got to do is write it down on one page, what you own and what you owe. And I've actually got a template for you guys where you can do this. And we'll put the link in the description so you guys can download this. But you've got to put on all of your assets, what the values are, however much it is, and all of your liabilities from your credit card to your buy now, pay later, your student loan, all of that stuff. We got to get that down on paper so you actually know what is coming in and what's going out, because this is I'm taking my top off and taking a photo with all my rolls and all their glory moment, right? But for your money. So if that's step number one, what's step number two, Andrew?
All I'm thinking about is
you want to see the photo, don't you?
What I'm thinking
you want to
is
see me with my
we'll
kit
just
off.
turn this into a next year's calendar for the webinar.
Well, the good news is I've done something about it. I'm probably about 5 or 6 kilos down now. So I mean, it's kind of working. But what's step number two?
Step number two: get a handle on where your money is actually going, and I think you need an automatic system because we've got busy lives, and no matter what you're doing in your life, you either think you're busy or you are busy. And so either way, it's one of those things that you probably just kind of put to the side. And there are different books that tell you how to carve up your money and how it should be spent. One popular kind of system is the 50-30-20 rule, where 50% goes to your needs, 30% goes to your wants, and 20% goes to your savings. And on this show, we like to talk about the barefoot system. And now that's what Ed's put into the spreadsheet. So
if we think about the average person, right, if you guys are taking home $2,042 a week, under the Barefoot Investors system, great Australian finance book, really rate it. 60% of your money goes into your blow account for your everyday expenses. So that would be $1,225 for the average person if you're following this system.
Does that include your mortgage payment?
That includes your mortgage payments. Now, do you remember how much goes into your splurge account for your little treaties?
20%.
10%. 10% goes into your splurge account, $204. So that's for your coffees, your movie tickets, your little treaties. That's your wants, not your needs. Now, under this system, we also provision for your smile account. That's like your family holiday, saving up for the pair of shoes you want, saving up for the jacket you really want. So that would be $204 a week as well. It sounds like a lot, but if you're 2 adults with 2 kids, I know that money's going to get eaten up pretty fast, right? Living on the average income is no walk in the park, is it? But if you are following this system, 20% of your income goes into the fire extinguisher account, which is your long-term savings and also goes towards paying off debt. That's $408 per week if you can make that happen. Now, there are some people who are going to say, yep, that's really easy. I could do that. I am already maybe even saving more than $408 a week. There are going to be some parents out there who earn the average income and have 3 kids and have a mortgage that's larger than average and say, no way, Jose, I'm not going to be able to do that at all, right? And if you are following the barefoot system, you've got to be really conscious about what you do with that 20%, the fire extinguisher, the $408. $408 per week. And what he says is there are 3 steps that you should take. The first thing you want to do is set up your emergency account. So that's typically $1,000 in a separate account that you don't touch. And in this example, it'd take 2.5 weeks to save that up. And the reason he does this, he calls it your mojo account, so that if the car breaks down, you don't put it on your credit card, right? Because even that $1,000 is going to make you change how you feel. You got a bit more of a spring in your step, your mojo as he calls it, because you stop living from kind of one surprise to the next. Now, after you've done that, step 2 is to start paying off your dumb debt. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but that's your credit card debt, what I call your bubblegum debt, because it tastes lovely at the start when you're chewing. Oh, wonderful flavors. I'm so happy that I bought that Yui Boom on my credit card, and then the bill comes and you think, I don't like this anymore. And it's like chewing bubble gum and the flavor's gone and you absolutely hate it. And then step 3 is to invest for the long term. But if we think about paying off dumb debt, one thing that you've got to do as part of your taking your top off moment is to list out all of your small dumb debts in a spreadsheet. Again, you can use the template that's down in the description to get this, where you list out whether you've got a credit card or a buy now, pay later, or a personal loan or a car loan. And you say, well, how much do I own and what is the interest rate? This is really, really important, because then what you can do is decide, well, what are you going to pay off first? Now, there are 2 kind of methods for doing that. We've got the avalanche method and the snowball method. Now, what's the avalanche method?
So in terms of the 2 different systems, I know that Ed and I have both used the different kind of ways of doing this. So Avalanche is the one that kind of I prefer, where you focus on the highest interest rate debt first, because in my mind, that's the most effective. Like, hey, that's costing me the most money per year, so I want to get rid of that first. So in a common example, it could be the credit card, because it would be high interest rate, and so I want to tackle that first. In terms of the snowball system, that's where you focus on the smallest loan first. Forget about the interest rate. It could be nothing. And that gives you a quick win. And then as soon as you're finished paying that off, you roll that payment into the next smallest and you focus on paying that one off next. And then you just do that until you complete at the end. So you disregard the interest rate. You look for the easy win.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're the smart one because you like paying off the high interest debt first. I like paying off the smallest one because I'm like, I just need some wins to get me going. But this is so transformational. I did this myself when I was deep in debt, got it all down in a spreadsheet. This is one of the things that really turned it around. And when I saw how messed up I was financially all of those years ago, that's really when things started to change. I know this is so simple, but if you don't do it, and I know why a lot of people don't want to do it, because then you'll realize how stuffed you are financially for some people.
To be fair, you only stuff if you don't know what the situation is and don't start to tackle it.
Yeah, but because it's scary, I understand why people don't do it. Now, let's say that you've gone through this process. We've got our fire extinguisher. That's our $408 a week. We're putting that into paying off all of our debt. Now we've got our emergency fund. We've got our bubblegum debt paid off. What is step number 3?
Step number 3 is to start investing outside of your home. Now, once you've sorted your cash flow, it's very tempting to be like, okay, now I'm just going to pay off my mortgage. But often I say to Kiwis, think about investing outside of your home, because all well and good to pay off your mortgage. And I get that. You do want to get rid of that monkey on your back. But you're going to have your mortgage probably for, even if you pay it off aggressively, probably for 15 years. Do you really want to put off starting to invest for another 15 years? Like, what does that do in terms of missing out on that compounding effect of the investment returns? And you're right, it does make sense to kind of pay down that mortgage. But again, you can do those simultaneously. And look, I'd begin by keeping it small and simple. Get an app like Sharesies or Kernel, get into a low-fee index fund, and I'd probably just start with putting a little bit of money aside. There's a lot of people who I talk to, someone that I just followed up with yesterday actually, who just, on a spreadsheet, and according to the bank, they can afford to top up a rental property by a couple of $100 a week. In their own mind, they're like, no, I don't know if we can yet. So I've said to them, go and set up one of these shares account, put $200 a week into it, keep it away from your banking accounts. You can't transfer it back across there. And if after 6 months, which I'm just checking in, you've done it, awesome. Maybe you can afford to invest. If you haven't been able to, or you dipped into that, then you're not ready yet. But at least you've probably got something there.
The one thing I also do is invest across different funds, right? So the way that I'd set up my Sharesies, as I have done, is when the money automatically comes in, I would auto invest that, right? So that investing is just this automated habit. You're not waiting to save up lots of money in your Sharesies account and then invest it all in one go. Just dollar cost average it like you do with your KiwiSaver. That just gets invested without you thinking about it. But I would also invest across different funds. I think it's very tempting because on social media, and I do this as well, right, we often talk about the S&P 500. You know, all these creators talk about the S&P 500 because it's one fund and it's very easy. But I would not put all of my money into an S&P 500 tracker fund and call it a day, right? And the reason I wouldn't do that is because then you're not actually that diversified. You're only invested in 500 large companies in one country in the world, and that might be particularly overvalued at the moment, depending on your view of things. And so what I'd probably want to do is look at a couple of different tracker funds around the globe and not just put all my eggs into a single fund. I'd want to diversify my risk in terms of countries, in terms of industries, in terms of fund managers, just to diversify it a bit. That's something I'd be seriously thinking about rather than just being like S&P 500 tracker fund. But the reason we talk about it online a lot is it's very easy to get the returns from the S&P 500. It's quite difficult as a content creator online to model out what a blended portfolio might look like over the long term, right? So that's why, even though a lot of creators talk about S&P 500 tracker funds, which I personally do invest in, I wouldn't make that my only investment, is what I'm saying.
And of course, while you're doing this, because we're a property show, you might consider property. Now, if you do have a house and you're paying down a mortgage, let's say you've got a $770,000 house, your mortgage is $389,000. So again, we've used those average figures. Your interest rate might be 5%, your term might be 25 years. At the moment, you got about a 50% equity in that property, 50% LVR roughly, which means that you've got equity of $381,000. But of course, we all know you can't just max out your house. So if we work on an 80% LVR, the maximum a bank will lend you against your own house most of the time, that's $227,000 worth of usable equity, the stuff you can unlock to use as a deposit for something else or to invest. And so that is the amount that you can take out, subject to the bank approving it, and use as a deposit for an investment property.
And you probably wouldn't use all of that, right? I mean, if you were to use all of it and could get the lending approved, you'd be buying something that's like $1.1 million, maybe
You're probably
even
not
more.
going to do that if your house is worth $770 and your income's the average income.
100%. But if you were buying, say, a $500K starter investment property, based on the numbers that I've run, you might only need a household income of $120,000 before tax, and these guys are sitting at $140K, in order to get that across the line. You might struggle to get a second investment property on the average incomes, but based on the numbers I've run, it looks like they might be able to purchase a starter home depending on how much they're spending per week and how much additional debt they would. That $120,000 number I said to buy an investment property in addition to the mortgage they've got, that's based on having like quite a clean situation. So you do that after you've cleared out all of that bubblegum debt.
Yeah.
But why would we bother bringing property into it?
Well, I think the biggest thing is with leverage, i.e. the ability to borrow against your house and borrow against a rental property, you can actually supercharge your returns. Now you can supercharge your losses. We've spoken about that on our show as well, but I'm not going to re-go through that today. I'm just going to focus on the returns. If you took that usable equity and turned it into a deposit, so let's say your current age is...
Do you know what the average age in New Zealand is?
39?
38, pretty close.
Oh, that was pretty close. Let's say, how many years have you put in there for the years of protection?
I said 27 years. So if they're investing until they're 65.
Cool, which makes sense because sometimes people, when I meet them and they've not got any other investments right now, they say, I want to retire at 55. Get real. You've got KiwiSaver and you've got to wait for the government super. You're not retiring at 55 yet. So let's work towards 65 and work backwards.
And obviously there's nothing wrong with KiwiSaver. It's just that you can't get it before 65.
Yeah. And so let's say you go out and you buy an investment property with $525,000, something a bit more conservative than that $1.1 million property. Let's say it goes up by 5% a year on average over that 27 years. The mortgage you're going to take out all of the 525 in this example because we've just paid off our bubblegum debt. We don't have any extra cash.
And if we think about that property, you've talked before about top-ups and that at the start, the rent from a property might not cover all of the costs of owning it. What might the top-up for that property be per week?
I'd probably say maybe $200 a week.
Okay, so if they've got $408 that they're putting into their fire extinguisher and $200 is coming into this, that means that we can actually, I put $200 here, they can put $208 a week into their shares.
Okay, so now we've separated out that fire extinguisher. We've got some in our liquid fund, our shares, 208, and we're putting 200 into property, which we're not going to see. We're not going to see any liquid cash until we sell that property.
And if we think about how much shares might go up, what do you think after fees, after tax per year?
I'd say 7% would be quite a good return.
That's good. That's what I've put in here.
There we go.
So if we've got $208 going into shares and that's going up by 7%, and we're topping up a rental property that's going up by 5% per year, then we can see by the time they hit 65, their property, based on these numbers, could be worth, and bear in mind this is 27 years in the future, 1.9 mil. They'd have equity in there of 1.4 mil based on these numbers, and their shares would be worth 805K. So property's done more of the heavy lifting here because of that leverage side, but shares is very, very important. Their total wealth would be $2.2 million, but just looking at that number would be quite misleading because that's 27 years in the future, and in 27 years, a dollar today is not worth a dollar in the future. It'll be worth far, far less. So once we inflation adjust it, that's the same as saying about $1.15 million if all of the projections worked out. Now, it doesn't quite get you into Ronald Reid territory because you're starting at 38 rather than perhaps at 20. He might have been far, far, far more frugal. Maybe he got a higher return because the share market performed exceptionally well over his lifetime. But thinking about the average Kiwis, if they did this plan, getting to $1.15 million of today's money by the time they retire, plus their KiwiSavers, we haven't factored that in. We haven't factored in them increasing, like putting more money into shares as their incomes go up either, just $208 per week. This is what could potentially happen based on these numbers.
I notice you also haven't factored in the net, the cash that they've put into the property, but I assume that's because for, say, the first 15 years, it might be negative, costing them, and then the next 15 years, it might be making the money. And step number 5, you need to really figure out what you're investing for. And really, you should do this earlier, but you might have thought we were too woo-woo if we put this first. But I really do think that people need to remember what the long-term gain is before they start putting aside that or making those short-term sacrifices or the pain. Because once you start putting aside 208 into a shares account and you put 200 into a rental property top up, that's $408 that you're not actually going to enjoy each week. And if you don't have the end in mind, you might just give up. You might get kind of 2 years down the track and go, oh, this property hasn't gone up in value. I need to sell it. It's a bad investment. Or these shares, they've dropped. I'm just going to get out of it. It doesn't work like that. You've got to be thinking long term. And so you really need to have that focus. Well, what is the pain for if over the long term?
And one thing that I'll say is often whenever we do any sort of projections like this and say, hey, the average person could have maybe $1.15 million by the time they're retired, people will say, oh, well, I don't like that you said that property was going to go up by 5%. I think it's going to be 3%. Or I don't like that you said that shares was going to go up by 7%. I think it's going to be 5% or 10%. All good. Go download the spreadsheets, use them, put in whatever numbers you feel comfortable with, and you will get a projection that you feel like you can stand by. So go download the spreadsheets, have a good play with them. I'd just say that some of the mistakes people make is waiting until they feel like they've got enough money to start, whereas actually you just kind of need to start. You don't really need to be that clever with any of this. It's about download Sharesies or whatever app you like. That's my favorite app. Set up an automatic payment, choose some funds that you like, and you're starting to invest, right? Like it's not that hard. You've just got to make that first step.
So now you know that Ronald Reid, the janitor worth $8 million, wasn't particularly special or lucky. He just followed the boring money advice consistently. And if you're serious about building wealth in New Zealand, make sure you watch this next video where you'll learn the 6 laws of building wealth. Click the video on your screen and watch it now.